afternoon again. I'm Dr. Michael Dixon. I'm the Dean of the School of Graduate Studies. It's my pleasure to welcome you here today to our final scheduled event for this Graduate Student Appreciation Week. And it's my pleasure to welcome you and to introduce our speaker this afternoon. She is Miss Danielle Bonczewski, and she serves as Career Coordinator in the University of Southern Indiana's Career Success Center. She supports students as they explore career paths, build application materials, and develop the skills needed to succeed in the job market. With a background in psychology from Purdue University and a master's degree in school counseling from Indiana State University, Danielle brings both knowledge and passion to helping students grow both professionally and personally. In this workshop, Danielle will guide you on how to strengthen your CVs and resumes by avoiding common pitfalls, emphasizing the importance of presenting experiences in a clear, strategic way that aligns with specific roles and expectations. Attendees can expect to learn key distinctions between CVs and resumes, how to effectively highlight their experiences, and how to responsibly integrate AI into the CV writing process. Danielle's goal for this workshop is for all of you to leave feeling confident, prepared, and equipped with practical tools for career success. So without further ado, I'll turn it over to Danielle, who present, and I hope we'll have some time at the end for participants to ask Danielle any questions that they may have. Thank you for joining us, Danielle. It's all yours.
Thanks so much for the introduction. Thank you guys all for being here today. I'm glad you've taken the time to invest in your professional development. This is such an important step in your career journey. So I'm going to share my screen to get us started. Can everybody see that all right?
Perfect.
Okay, awesome. All right, so before we kind of start off, I want to get a quick sense of where we all are starting from. So a couple questions that you can just drop in the chat, or if you want to turn your mic on, either one's great. First off, have you used AI for your resume or CV writing? If so, which platforms? And then kind of on a scale of 1 to 10, 10 being the most confident, how confident are you that your resume reflects your unique value? So put it in the chat or turn your mic on, either one. Gemini, yeah. Not really sure how to use it. You guys can go ahead and keep putting it in there, but just based off those responses, I mean, you can always see kind of sets the tone no matter where you're on the spectrum. We have some people who use it and are familiar, some people who have no idea, never really used it. So not, but a 10 on confidence. Love the confidence. All right, so before we dive in, I want to briefly kind of frame what today's session is about and what you can expect to walk away with. Dr. Dixon kind of touched on a little bit, but our focus today is on strengthening how you present yourself on paper, specifically through your CV or resume, and how to do that in a way that's both strategic and authentic, especially in a world where AI tools are becoming more and more common. So at the end of our session, you should be able to clearly understand the differences between a CV and a resume, and when to use either one. We'll talk about how to effectively position your graduate level experiences in a way that communicate real value to employers. We will also be spending time discussing applicant tracking systems and different tools with AI and how to effectively and ethically use them. And then we'll also cover some common pitfalls and mistakes to avoid to make sure your documents sound like you and reflect your strengths accurately. Okay. Another kind of hopefully discussion question. I want to know kind of what you guys know about CVs or resumes. What are the differences? Are there overlapping similarities? Do you guys know anything about either? Really have no idea. Would love to get kind of your input on where you're at. Also, feel free to turn your mics on. You don't have to do it just in the chat.
I would imagine a curriculum vitae is everything that you have done academically and professionally, where a resume can be fine-tuned towards the role that you're looking for and making sure that you have like your skills tailored to go and match that.
Awesome, perfect. And Alex in the chat kind of went with that. CVs are more for like higher ed, educational experiences, background, things like that. Awesome. All right. So, kind of like we already just touched on, but to clarify those differences, a lot of people do use them kind of interchangeably, but obviously they serve very different purposes depending on your career goals. So we'll start with the resume. Resume typically 1 to 2 pages, used primarily for industry-focused roles. So these would be like corporate settings, nonprofits, healthcare organizations, government roles, things like that. Pretty much like most anything outside of like academia and research. Resumes are very targeted and strategic. They focus on skills, most importantly, the impact of your work. That means the bullet points on there should be results oriented, highlighting what you've accomplished, not just what you were responsible for. So say like, some resumes, your bullet points might be like responsible for managing a project. We kind of want to have that more results oriented by saying something like led a project that increased engagement by 25%, kind of showing the outcome and the values there. So then with a CV, primarily used for academic research, teaching focused positions. Unlike a resume, a CV is not limited to 1 or 2 pages. It is a comprehensive record of your academic and professional history. Can include a variety of sections. Some are like publications, presentations, teaching experience, grants, certifications, professional affiliations. The list can go on. So with these, rather than tailoring it down and having that industry specific focused, you're expanding it to show the full scope of your scholarly work, contributions, research, things like that. So now this is where it gets a little more nuanced, especially for graduate students. You may find that you were like not strictly in one lane or the other. You might be applying to both academic and industry roles, or roles that value both research and practical experience. So in those cases, you might consider kind of like a hybrid approach. So maybe a resume that incorporates some aspects of a CV, but still remains concise and tailored. Basically, the key takeaway, your document should align with your career goals, not just your background. So I want you to kind of take a second to think, maybe about the roles you're interested in pursuing after your program. Ask yourself, what are the primary, am I targeting industry roles? Am I looking at academic research positions? Am I somewhere in between? I don't know, take maybe like 10 to 15 seconds, think about it, and then identify whether you need a resume, a CV, or maybe a hybrid, and just go ahead and drop it in the chat when you kind of figure out what you think you may need. If you have questions, also feel free just to speak out or drop that in the chat as well. One resume so far. What about everyone else? Everyone think they need a oh, I'll say it again, my question. So think about whether you need a CV, a resume, or maybe a hybrid, and just drop in either one in the chat. Just to kind of get an idea on where everybody's at. Brandon needs a CV, resume. Lots of us need resumes, awesome. And I will say too, like that might change depending like your career goals now versus your career trajectory, maybe like, I don't know, like 5 to 10 years. Like starting off my professional career, had a resume, but planning to stay in higher education. I'm sure like, adding on presentations like this or other things more on that CV level, I'll probably be gearing more towards a CV kind of down the road. So lots of different kind of paths to take there. History program, unsure if I'll need a CV or resume. So again, like that'll kind of depend on your career goals as well as your background. Typically, most academic programs lean towards CV, but that kind of depends on the experience you have to put on there. So we can always chat about specific questions down the road too. Okay, so now that we've kind of set that differentiation, let's shift about how to kind of write these documents all together. So I feel like most people, when they think about writing like a resume or CV, they just think of like, what have I done and like throw it all on paper. But instead of listing just kind of what you've done, I want you to think kind of more of like a hiring manager or maybe like a hiring committee. So at the end of the day, I mean, they're not just reading the document, they're evaluating through a very specific lens. And those lenses are usually centered around kind of three key questions. First one is, what problem does this person solve? Employees aren't just hiring a person, they're hiring a solution. So when you're writing your resume or your CV, every bullet point should help answer that question in some sort of way. So, maybe for example, talking about like conducting research, like you don't want to just say like you did research on student engagement, but maybe you conducted research on student engagement and identified factors that improved retention. That kind of shows that full circle how you solve the problem here. Second question they're going to look at is, what evidence supports this person's competence? This is where a lot of resumes tend to fall short. Graduate students often have incredible experience, but they present it in a way that maybe sounds too passive or vague. You want to focus on evidence that's data, outcomes, specifics, results. Also, when tailoring becomes critical, a strong resume or CV is not generic. It reflects an understanding of the role and the organization. This means adjusting your language, maybe reordering bullet points, reordering the sections and headers you have in there. Maybe it's emphasizing different experiences based on what that employer seems to value. And I will say a lot of this can usually be found within the job or program description. Usually just like a quick 30-second skim, you can get a really solid idea on maybe like what skills are most valued or qualifications or certifications that are most important to them. Let's see here. So now beyond that, what makes you uniquely competitive as a graduate level student? You have experiences that go beyond what an undergraduate candidate brings. The key is making those experiences both visible and relevant. So don't just say like completed a research project, kind of what I went over before. Be specific, like what methods did you use? What tools or frameworks did you apply? Employers value the ability to interpret data and apply data, so highlighting tools you've used and insights you've gathered. Leadership is another really big differentiating factor, especially within like an academic or professional organization. If you led a team, if you coordinated events, if you managed initiatives, make that clear on your resume or CV. It kind of shows that influence and responsibility aspect. Okay, additionally, any kind of like teaching, mentorship, TA, grant writing, clinical and field experience are big differentiating factors as well. Especially the clinical and field experience here. This shows that bridge between theory and practice. Employers love to see that you can apply what you've learned in a real world setting. So basically, the key takeaway is it's not enough just to have these experiences. You have to position them effectively. This means using strong verbs, being specific, focusing on outcomes, and always tying back the experience to a value. So as you kind of review or you start building your resume or CV, I want you to kind of ask yourself, am I just describing what I did, or am I clearly showing like how I contributed? Because that shift from the description to strategy is what really sets you apart. Does anybody have any questions about that? That was kind of a lot of information.
I have a question. I think it'd probably be easier if I voiced it instead.
Okay, sure, go ahead.
I have a feeling I might be outside of the scope of like the intended audience. I'm looking to work on the resume, but mine is more tailored towards shifting my resume to help me transition from contracting project manager to more of the director level upon finishing my MBA.
Okay,
And I'm assuming this is more for just like new grad students. So
I will go
I'm wrong,
into.
I'm happy to stay. If not, I shouldn't.
No, yeah, we definitely go into like general resume writing, how to write bullet points, how to position yourself. It's not just strictly towards graduate students. I was kind of using those as examples.
Okay.
Then we also go into like actual AI usage, which is helpful in like vetting job descriptions, writing your resume, preparing for interviews. So this is just kind of that, like the strategic positioning. This applies much beyond graduate students. It's just kind of explaining, how do you position yourself instead of just writing down what you've done, but using it, strategically. Does that make sense?
Sounds good. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, so now we're going to start to talk about AI a little bit. I don't know, is anybody familiar with ATS or applicant tracking systems? Usually there's a kind of a mix. Basically, an applicant tracking system is AI embedded software that employers use to collect, organize, and screen job applications before a human ever reviews them, before human eyes are set on them. So when you submit your resume or CV online, it's often scanned by an applicant tracking system. It looks for keywords, qualifications, relevant experiences that match the job description, and it kind of filters through them and then ranks them. So it's important to understand ATS isn't like reading your document like a person, it is parsing it. So it is picking out information that is relevant. It ranks you as an applicant. It'll filter out people who do not meet the minimum requirements. And then at that point, some employers rely solely on ATS. Some of them will get the results back and then still read through all the resumes and applications separately. But a big thing here is making sure your resumes and CVs align with the position well. We'll go into formatting here in a second, but clear formatting, using keywords, avoiding like overly complex designs, graphics, things like that. Pretty much in short, ATS decides whether or not your application gets seen by a recruiter is kind of that first step in the hiring process. So optimizing your document for this technology and the human readers is essential. I'm going to go over formatting. Does anybody have any questions on how ATS works or what it is? Does that make sense to most people? I will say there are two indicators that a company is using an ATS. First one is, and I said most companies are, I would say over 90% of companies use this. So when you have to apply for a job, you have to upload your resume, but then it also makes you fill out the exact same information on the same application. That's usually an indicator, as well as the second you hit submit on that application, you immediately get an email saying, thank you, we've received your application. That's another good indicator that they are using these kind of systems. But I touched on kind of keywords and formatting. So a big thing about making sure your resume can be processed and read by an ATS is having a compliant resume or CV. So we'll look at some examples here in a second, but basically it is having standard headers and fonts, nothing too abstract or out there. simple, clear, and concise formatting, no templates, no tables, columns, boxes, and then keyword optimization. So, different industries, like maybe like finance, they have certain keywords and terms, technical terms they use. A lot of those are going to be in that job description. So kind of wanting to match that is important. And then some benefits: increased visibility, higher rankings, reduced filtering responses. So the more ATS compliant your resume is, the more likely you are to kind of go to that next step of the hiring process. Anybody have any questions on this part? No. All right, so take a second to look at this one, then we have one after. And again, put it in the chat or just say it out loud. Maybe some things you notice about this resume, something you like, maybe things you don't like. Just kind of give a little bit of reflection there. I'll give you guys a minute or so. Alex said the resume clearly uses a template with 2 columns and different colors and icons. Also, best practice not to include a picture. Awesome. Anybody else have any feedback on this one? Use quantitative points in their bullet points. Awesome. Does anybody know why we discourage including a picture on your resume or CV? More room for bias, Yep, exactly. Federal law. Yeah, so kind of with that discrimination bias aspect, we meet with employers to kind of get feedback on what they look for, what they don't look for in resumes. And we've had employers straight up tell us if they come across a resume with a picture, they immediately throw it away, no matter how qualified the person is. Yeah, because they don't want to be held accountable or accused for hiring someone based on their picture, whether it's positive or negative. So yeah, just eliminating any bias by not including any pictures. Kind of similar with an address. That's more of a privacy standpoint. Some people include their full address on their resume. That's not really necessary. Usually just a general city and state is plenty. All right, yeah, so going back to the feedback here. So yes, Andrew obviously used some kind of template on here. There's kind of the 2 different columns. He has little icons next to his strengths. He has a picture like we talked about. These little circles, I guess, to indicate proficiency with languages. So this is a very not ATS compliant resume. So the reason we typically discourage with the templates, tables, boxes. So say that experience section right there is like he just filled out a text box to put everything in there. Most ATS, when you put them through and they try to start scanning and parsing, text boxes often just come up completely blank. So Andrew may be the most qualified, very experienced person, but if this, resume is parsed and scanned and no experience comes up, they're going to think that he has no relevant experience. So that's kind of the biggest thing with formatting wise. It was pointed out that he uses quantitative points and bullet points, which that is a big plus, kind of like we talked about being specific and targeting. So Andrew, he did a good job on that one. Now we're going to move on to this one. If people want to take a second to look at it and maybe share their thoughts in the chat or turning on their mic. Any, haven't seen. Okay, yeah, so their first section up there, they have some indented bullet points, which is a little bit different than the rest of their resume. Oops. There we go. You'll see, starting at the top, they don't have a picture on there, which is already a plus. They have their email address, a phone number, and a general location. Anybody see anything that maybe wouldn't be ATS compliant or something that they like about the format that they hadn't thought of before? I will say this is an ATS compliant resume. It's very simple. It's easy to read. It's easy on the eyes, I like to say. Talked about consistency earlier. You'll notice on their experience section, they have their dates on the right-hand margin. So for the other sections, as their education, other jobs, they also put their dates on the right-hand margin. Use past tense in a job they listed as presently working. Yep. That is kind of, some people do choose to do that. I wouldn't advise against that because obviously you are presently in that position. You'll notice, let's see, they have, so even like their section headers, just experience, education. I don't know if I'd keep that section as broad as just putting other. But they don't have, it's pretty standard. Like some people put education as like academic journey or something like that, but just keeping it very concise, very simple, very professional, like they did in this case, is definitely a benefit. For this section down here, other, depending on how they are on spacing, they probably could have made a skills section. They probably could have made a certifications training section, but maybe they felt they were a little bit limited, so they just kind of crunched everything into that. But I wouldn't honestly put a section as broad as other. Carter asks, what is your opinion on putting a summary or introduction at the top of your resume? Yeah, so these are slowly, I feel like, going away. They're still more than okay to include on there. We usually advise the section to be called like professional summary, and that is a couple sentences long, and it's kind of reiterating the most significant, most relevant points of your experience. You could also do an objective, which is just kind of a simple one-liner. So I usually recommend that more for students because it's just more concise. So for example, it could be graduate student in this major seeking an internship in this industry would just be the one sentence objective. But you could definitely include them. I don't think employers really have a preference one way or the other. I will say, resumes are typically looked at for, I think the time is like 7 to 10 seconds, like the average time. So thinking about, what information is most crucial, what do you want employers to definitely see and read? And especially when it goes towards the top, as employers or hiring managers work their way down the page, they will start skimming more and more. So just kind of being conscious of where your information is and how you want it interpreted. Okay, so the margins seem off, recommend. So yeah, maybe their margins might be a little, in terms of 1 inch margins, definitely you don't have to. I've made some that go down as small as like 0.5 inches. A lot of that is kind of have to be like a self choice as to what you think looks appealing and how you're using the kind of the white space of your paper. If you have a lot of information, like this person honestly does have a good amount of information. So maybe, making those margins smaller would be a little bit too much on the eyes. Maybe you need kind of those bigger margins to have a little bit more white space. But that is kind of a case by case situation. I would say a lot of times when maybe like a student who's like a freshman, they don't have a ton of information to put on there yet. We definitely wouldn't go smaller than an inch just because you're using more of your paper this way than down. But you can definitely go smaller, just being mindful about, is this easy to look at? Is it easy to like process the information on there? All right. I'll come back to their CV examples, but they're kind of the same thing as we talked about. And also I can provide those samples at the end as well. But okay, so going back kind of to the AI side of things, topic that's on everyone's mind, kind of what this whole presentation is centered around, AI in resume and CV writing. There's so many tools out there, ChatGPT, Grammarly, Claude, Copilot, whatever. They can be really, really helpful if you understand like their strengths and their limitations. So we're going to start off by talking about what AI does well in terms of resume and CV writing, and then we'll talk about where it, tends to fall short down the road. Okay, so AI is a great starting point. It can help generate draft bullet points, especially if you're kind of stuck or feeling a little unsure of how to phrase your experience. And we'll do a little more interactive here next, but like say you input just a rough description of your role, AI can help transform that into a more polished professional language. It's also really helpful in translating academic language into more industry-specific language, especially being students, you may be kind of used to that academic language and writing. So AI can be helpful in kind of making that adjustment. Another strength is improving clarity and conciseness. Sometimes we're honestly a little too close to our own experiences and we can over-explain. AI helps tighten that up and make your bullet points a little more direct and impactful. AI also helps identify missing skills. We'll do this here next, but if you paste a job description into AI, it can highlight like key skills or keywords that you may not have emphasized in your resume or CV. So this can be really, really helpful when you're going in to tailor your resume. Another benefit is like that customization, tailoring for specific job postings. Just important because, a strong resume is never like a one size fits all. You need to tailor it. You need to customize it. Targeting industry, targeting job descriptions. So finally, kind of with that, AI can help optimize your resume for applicant tracking systems. These systems, like I said, scan for keywords and formatting, and AI can help ensure your document aligns with what those systems are looking for. So overall, AI, really powerful tool for drafting, refining, and tailoring. But there are some limitations, so we're going to go over those. Those are really important to consider as well. So first off, AI struggles severely with authentic voice. So if you rely too heavily on it, your resume is going to start to sound generic, robotic, maybe even like overly polished in a way that just doesn't feel or sound like you. And oftentimes employers can pick up on that. So just being cautious about that, especially more than ever. I feel like we're hearing from employers that are getting kind of the same wording, same phrases, especially maybe in those professional summaries or objectives, where they can just, it's a telltale sign that, someone wrote this using AI. Also, it lacks context. AI doesn't fully understand the depths or nuances of your experiences the way that you do. It might miss what's most important, or it might misinterpret the significance of your work if you're not guiding it carefully. Another issue is accuracy. AI will pretty much generate content that sounds right, but that doesn't mean that it is right. It's your responsibility, honestly, to verify everything, data, metrics, responsibilities. It's kind of more on you to make sure those are accurate. With that, there are ethical considerations. AI is used to, enhance your writing, but it can exaggerate, fabricate, misrepresent your experience. So those would have serious consequences, obviously, in the hiring process. Say AI throws in a metric or a result that isn't true or is exaggerated, and it's brought up in an interview and you can't speak to that, that obviously won't go over well. AI also tends to overgeneralize, so it may give you bullet points that sound good, but they're kind of vague. So it might, if you put in like demonstrated leadership or improved efficiency, there's not really specifics on that. It's kind of hard to speak to that. And those will not stand out to employers because there's no, value to that or outcomes. And then lastly, AI cannot detect inflated claims. So if something is overstated or unrealistic, AI won't flag it. It doesn't know to do so. So again, you have to be the one to make sure that that content is honest and that it's defensible. So a key takeaway, AI is a tool. It's not a replacement for your thinking. The most effective way to use AI in terms of resume and CV writing, starting with your own ideas, and then like your own accomplishments, your experiences, your voice, and then just using AI to kind of refine and strengthen it. Not the other way around. Simple way to think about it is you provide the substance, AI helps with the structure and polish. So when you're kind of working on your documents, just consider, is this an accurate reflection of me? Can I speak to every line of this in an interview? And does this clearly communicate my value? If the answer is yes, congrats, you're using AI the right way. If not, this might be your sign to kind of pull back, reground the content of your own experiences and kind of reevaluate. All right, I just kind of touched on this a little bit, but I think it's important to definitely reiterate and go over it in more depth. Does anybody have questions at this point about what AI does or how to use it or how to not use it? Okay, we will keep going. All right, now that we talked about what AI can and can't do, let's go more to the ethics of it. End of the day, like your resume or CV is not just a document, it's a professional representation of you. Your credibility is tied into every single word that goes in there. So there's a few things I want you to be very intentional about when using it. First is the accuracy and truthfulness. Like we've said, everything needs to be accurate so that you can speak to confidently in an interview. If AI generates a stronger sounding bullet point, it can be really tempting to leave it as it is. But again, you need to ask yourself, is this true? How would I explain this if, a hiring manager asked me about it? A good rule of thumb is if you can't elaborate on it in detail, it shouldn't belong on your document. Second is being aware of institutional or organizational AI policies. Some industries, institutions, employers even may have specific expectations around AI and like the use in application materials. So just kind of being mindful of that. Especially relevant to those of you looking into like research roles, academic programs, any kind of grant funded positions. Third is avoiding fabricating metrics. This is honestly one of the most common pitfalls. It can be really easy to kind of just fall into this. AI loves numbers. It often inserts metrics in there just kind of like willy-nilly, like increased efficiency by 30% instead of like, improved outcomes. So if you did not actually measure it, if the number isn't real, you should not include it. You can still be specific without fabricating or including metrics if you don't have a number. So just being very, very mindful of that. Fourth is disclosure. In some cases, usually academic and research settings, you might be asked whether or how or if you used AI in your application materials. If disclosure is required, be honest and transparent. Using AI as a tool is not wrong, but misrepresenting your work is. So just maintaining ownership of your content. Obviously, AI can help you draft and refine. The final product should still feel like you. I said you're responsible for every line. Don't just copy and paste. Make sure it aligns with how you would naturally communicate. And like I said, you're kind of the expert on your own experiences here. AI is there to support you, but it should not be replacing your thinking. Anybody have questions on kind of the ethics and use of that? Okay, so now I'm going to go through and show you kind of some ways to use AI in terms of looking at job descriptions, your resume, and even preparing for an interview. So I'll go over each of these in depth, but these are just kind of some prompts you can kind of plug into AI. So first one is a job description analysis prompt. So I'm going to copy and paste this, analyze this job description and generate the top 10 skills, competencies, and keywords. And I just found a position at Old National Bank. So let me switch screens. Let me make sure. This one, okay. So I have this job description, banking center manager. I'm going to copy and paste the whole entire position. And we'll kind of just see. Oops, that's a resume. Let me grab. Oh, maybe it did go. Oh, it all went in there. Okay, awesome. But their whole thing is in there. And it is starting to generate the top skills. It's picked out from the job description. So P&L management, sales leadership, talent development, all the different skills of this industry. And then here are the keywords and phrases. Here's that ATS resume optimization piece. So like I said, don't just throw in those keywords just for the sake of it. But if you have experience and you have skills in these areas, these are important keywords and phrases you're going to want to make sure you include. It even kind of gives you a short idea of, how to use these in your resume or your LinkedIn profile or, for interview prep. Anybody have questions on, what this generates or if there's different ways to do it or anything like that? Has anybody ever used AI for anything like this before? Yep. No, it's a little mixed there. Some. So the next piece, let me go back here for a second. Okay. Okay. Next piece, an interview preparation prompt. I use this a lot. We conduct mock interviews in our department with students. So I have AI help me a lot with generating potential interview questions. So we'll plug this same thing in. Copy and paste it. We'll go back to our other screen, and I don't need to re-put the job description in there. It remembers. So I'll say asking for some interview questions based on that job description, and it often gives you a lot. And it breaks stuff into different types of questions, which I think is very beneficial. All the different kind of skills or industry parts of it. Yeah, here we go. The behavioral questions. And even afterwards, it prompts you if you want example answers. So there's a lot of preparation you can do behind the scenes here. Has anybody used AI for this part? Copilot looks very similar to chat. Yeah, it does. And I will say, doing your research, kind of figuring out which AI platforms maybe are the best or ones you like the most. But I will say I'm using Copilot for the sake of, it is Microsoft and that's what we use here at USI. Yeah, so even here it says, provide me answers, star style, which is that situation, task, action, result type of answer, create a mock interview with feedback. You can ask it to generate questions to ask the managers, things like that. So lots of different cool things you can do with that. Okay, got two more here. What brings me back? All right, so then the gap identification prompt, we're going to compare the resume to this job description to identify any missing skills, competencies, things like that. And I just have a basic resume sample that I will put in here. So I'll plug that, then I'll bring the screen back to the other one. Let's go back. This part. All right, so there's the prompt, and then I'm just gonna, again, copy and paste whole resume in there. And it should remember the job description still and go off that. Yeah. All right, so it shows the points that have strong alignment, and then as well as the places that maybe that resume has some gaps in accordance with the job description. So Archie the Eagle is lacking in some banking and financial services experience, consumer and small business lending. It's like he may have some work to do here, but it's nice that it also does show where there is strong alignment as well. Has anybody used AI for something similar to this, looking at your resume or your CV? I haven't, but I like the idea of it. Yep. And like I mentioned before, it kind of seems counterintuitive, but AI can help you navigate that AI embedded system of ATS, pointing out like more or less context, keywords and formatting, but it can be very helpful. But this sounds fantastic. Oh. So I'm glad. Seems like a good idea so far. Okay. So then I believe I have one more kind of example. So this is an impact amplification prompt. So I'm just going to pick this bullet point here, the responsible for membership sales. This is a bullet point from that resume. And I'm going to have it rewrite the bullet point to emphasize outcomes and measurable results. So I'm just going to copy and paste the whole thing. Flip it back. And while that generates, I did do this in a strategic order, starting with the job description analysis, because then it is in the AI's kind of like brain or system already. It already has that information, and we're working our way. Then I plugged in the resume, then I plugged in the bullet point. So I hope the kind of order I put that in makes sense for everybody. Okay, so let's see, I rewrote this bullet point. And I will say so I'll check here to see if it put in any fabricated information. I don't see any numbers so far, which here's an example with metrics. So if we had a number, this would be a good way to maybe phrase it like that. But it kind of breaks it up, banking friendly language, high impact, different emphasis and orientations, no pet metrics required in this one. So it gives you, again, we don't just copy and paste this, but it's kind of a great starting point. Gives us maybe some strong verbs to start with, maybe some ways to like front load the sentence or back load the information. This one right here, like well aligned with your background. So a bunch of different ideas. Would you be able to? Yeah, I think we're recording this and it'll be available afterwards. Yeah. All right, well, thanks. Yeah. Okay, yeah. Does anybody have any other like comments or questions on any of this kind of the AI demonstrations tutorials part of it? And there's a bunch of different ways. There's more prompts out there than these, but I think these are kind of the most standard beneficial ways to start. So yeah, I would encourage you maybe if you're looking at revising your resume or CV, or if you're starting to look at, job applications and job descriptions, incorporating AI into that process might just make it a little bit easier. Okay, let's head back. I think it's going to start from the beginning here. Okay. Any questions or comments or anything so far before I move on? Awesome. All right, so this is, before you incorporate AI, but just kind of a general breakdown on how to write just kind of generally strong bullet points for your resume or CV. So this is where your experience either really stands out or where it tends to get overlooked. The difference usually comes down to how strategically your bullet points are written. So two different kind of formulas here. I tend to stick with STAR just because it kind of sticks in my head. And it's relevant to how you answer an interview question, but situation, task, action, result, or strong verb, context, skill, measurable outcome. Basically kind of the same thing. So first out, kind of starting with a strong verb like conducted, led, analyzed, managed, whatever it may be, that immediately shows ownership and initiative of that bullet point and of whatever experience you're talking about. Next is context, what were you working on? What was the setting? What was the project? Whatever it may be. Then the skill, what specific expertise or ability did you use? This is where that graduate level training would really come into play. And then finally, a measurable outcome, like we talked about before, like what was the result of your work? Like what happened? What's the value in it? That's honestly could be the trickiest, most, recently left out piece. But it's really where it makes the biggest difference as well. So I have an example I wrote down here. So, a weak bullet point might say, assisted with research on patient outcomes. Not the worst, but it doesn't really say a ton. So it's just kind of vague. It doesn't say much about what you actually did or why it mattered at all. So a stronger version with completely made up metrics is conducted quantitative analysis of 300 plus patient records using SPSS, improving data reporting efficiency by 25%. I think we can all kind of hear the difference on that one. Okay, so the scope of the work is that 300 plus records, the skill, the quantitative analysis, the tool, SPSS, and the impact, that 25% improvement. So that's a little bit more compelling of a story. So as you are revising your bullet points or writing them out for the first time, keep a few key themes in mind. First, looking at your transferable skills. So even if your experience is strictly academic, the skills you're building, like research, communication, problem solving, those are highly relevant across any industries. Your job is just to make that connection clear. So being very mindful of you have transferable skills that are applicable to whatever, industry or role you're going into. Second, quantification, like using numbers and metrics. This could be percentages, sample sizes, frequency, scale, whatever it may be. Again, like numbers help employers understand the significance of the work you've done. Looking at scope, like how big was the project? What was the impact? Were you working independently? Were you working as a part of a team? Scope gives context and it frames kind of your level of responsibility. Looking at tools and technology, especially like at a graduate level, employers want to know like what systems or platforms or methodologies you're familiar with. So instead of just saying like, I analyze data, tell them how, like what tools did you use? What, types of analysis, things like that. So basically like a quick mental check you can do here is if someone were to read your bullet point with no additional context, would they understand what you did and why it mattered? The answer is no. So your opportunity to maybe strengthen it a little bit. But ultimately, like those strong bullet points, they don't just describe your experience, they demonstrate your value. And that's ultimately what gets you noticed more. Anybody have any questions on bullet point writing? Okey-dokey. We'll keep moving. Okay, we've kind of touched on all this already again, but I'm gonna reiterate here. So now we've talked about effective, ethical AI use. Let's talk about a little more when things can go really wrong and how they would maybe impact like your chances of securing a job or a place in a program or something like that. all of these common mistakes and pitfalls we're starting to see more and more in resumes and CVs as AI, grows and becomes more popular. And the reality is, like, employers are starting to recognize these patterns too. First one is like overly generic language. So I have a couple phrases that we see a lot of the time that employers can pick out as AI generated. And like I said, it's typically in that professional summary, or maybe it's in a cover letter. But phrases, tend to be like results-driven professional or detail-oriented team player. Those are two very generic, overly used phrases we see that just kind of scream that someone used AI to write it. Like, they sound good in theory, they sound polished, but they don't say anything very meaningful about you, and they're very overly used. Second one is buzzword stuffing. So this is when your resume is overloaded with like trendy terms like synergy is a big one, or strategic, or innovative, whatever it may be. Again, not a whole lot of substance behind them. So, I mean, they're not really a substitute for evidence. Employers are looking for proof, not just fancy word and polished language. Third one is inconsistent tone. So this is kind of when, like, part of your resume is AI generated and the other, part of it hasn't been touched. So, one part's written in your own voice. One is like highly formal and complex. The other ones are like a little more straightforward and authentic. So it just feels a little disjointed. You want your document to feel cohesive and consistent from top to bottom. And then fabricated metrics, talked about this earlier. AI likes to put numbers in there to make statements sound stronger, but if they're not real, it's an ethical issue. Big one too is inflated leadership in roles. AI may upgrade your role from like contributed to a project to led a strategic initiative or led a project. So, I mean, again, that might sound better on paper, but if it's not accurate, it can create problems in the interview. Sixth one is, repetitive structure. AI often generates bullet points that all start to kind of sound the same phrasing, same rhythm, same structure. So that can make your resume feel really flat, less engaging to read. Finally, the over-optimizing for ATS, right? It's still going to be read in most cases by human eyes. You still need to have that, sense of authenticity, sense of, human language in it. If it feels too robotic or cluttered or difficult to follow, it's not going to make a strong impression. So the goal is balance, optimize, but still clear and natural and compelling. So kind of to navigate this, I have a quick checklist, just to kind of, go through your head as you're using this, but like thinking like, is it accurate? Is it specific? Is it measurable? Does this sound like me? Again, can I defend it in an interview? Like I said before, if the answer is no to any of those, it's time to go back and rethink some things. But at the end of the day, I mean, your resume or CV, it's not about sounding impressive or sounding professional or sounding, super smart. It's about being clear and credible and aligning with your actual experience. Because AI can help you get there, it can help you refine it, get you there quicker, but it shouldn't be in control of this process. Any questions on anything I went over here? Because it can be a little bit tricky to, like, you kind of walk a fine line there with, especially the over optimizing for ATS. Like, yes, you want to put keywords in there, but you don't want to do it just for the sake of putting keywords in there. Any questions? Okay, so kind of some key takeaways, and then I think we'll have some time for questions if anybody has anything. So the kind of the core ideas I want you to carry with you as you go back to work on your resume or CV. Like I said, and I'll say it again, AI is a strategic assistant, accelerator, not a replacement. It helps you move faster. It helps you brainstorm, generate ideas, refine your writing, but it does not replace your experiences, your judgment, or your voice. You should always be leading the process. AI is there to support you, but not do your work for you. The importance of impact over responsibilities, like I went over. Employers are not just interested in like what you were assigned to do. They want to know what you achieved. Focus on outcomes, contributions, results. That's what differentiates you from other candidates. Third one is like that tailoring over generic. Like I said, there's no such thing as a one-size-fits-all resume. The strongest candidates are the ones who take their time to align their materials with the specific role, organization, job description. Even the smallest adjustments can honestly make a huge difference. Obviously, ATS compliancy, very crucial, like I touched on. Kind of final last thing is, your expertise really should be leading. Like you have valuable knowledge and skills and experiences, especially at the level you're at. So your resume should reflect your thinking, your contributions, and your voice. AI can help you refine it, but like you've gone through all this education and experiences, like, and you have a lot to speak to. So making sure that you're using your voice is really important. So as you move forward, I encourage you to approach your resume and your CV, not just as a document, but more as a strategic tool. Use AI. It's super helpful, but just being mindful of its limitations and ethical considerations. But tell your story, position yourself, the opportunities you're pursuing. If you take anything away from this today, just you bring the substance. AI helps, with polishing the information. Any questions? I think these are some resources that we'll provide afterwards. I'll have a short, there's AI prompts that I went over, and then an ATS formatting checklist. I can provide some sample resumes and CVs that are ATS compliant. We will send out a recording of this, and then there's some information on kind of what I do here with my email and phone number, and a link to the Career Launch website where you can schedule appointments if you want kind of more individualized one-on-one assistance with writing your resume or CV. Do we have any questions about anything I went over? There was a lot of information in there.
As you're thinking over some potential questions for Danielle, I wanted to take a moment to thank her again. This was really fantastic. I think almost every student participating with us today had to submit as part of their graduate studies application a resume or
Right.
CV. So I read these on a regular basis, and there are some CVs I read as part of an application that have some of the shortcomings that Danielle has highlighted here today. And this is really one of the things that we wanted to do for you, our students, as a way to show our appreciation and to ensure that you're successful once you complete your degree and go out and get that job or seek that promotion or a higher level position within the same industry or same company. This is such a crucial piece of it. I want to mention as well that Danielle's colleague in the Career Success Center, Megan O'Connor, has put together a career excellence series of workshops. You've been receiving some notifications about that throughout the week. Those in concert with Danielle's presentation today really will give you all of the tools you need to be successful with that graduate degree in hand, seeking that next step in your professional journeys. Thank you so much, Danielle.
Yeah, thank you. I did see Alex put a question there about alumni with our services. Yes, we work with alumni. So anybody even here after you graduate, after you go off and start your next step of your journey, you can always schedule virtual appointments or in person with us. We work with undergraduate, graduate, and alumni students. So definitely utilize our resources while you're here, but also after you go out and graduate. And yes, that link, Career Launch, is through my USI, and that's where you can go in and schedule an appointment, or you can just call the Career Success Center, walk in, email me, whatever is fine as well.
Danielle mentioned also that we'll make the recording of this presentation available, and also there will be some post-event communications that go out to all participants that will include a document in which all the information she's presented to us will be summarized. Well, Danielle, I don't see any additional questions. Thank you for providing your contact information. Perhaps someone might reach out directly to you. But I want to thank you again so much for agreeing to provide this invaluable resource to our students. It's been extremely helpful, and I have no doubt that it will help some of the participants or future viewers of this presentation achieve their professional goals.
Awesome. Yeah, thank you everybody for letting me present and for offering this collaboration. I hope it's been helpful, and yeah, definitely reach out with any Other questions, or if you want assistance working on your resume or CV.
Thank you, everyone. Have a wonderful day.